Good morning and thank you all for being here. I'm Director Torres with the Governor's Office of Highway Safety. Today I want to address a growing threat on our roads, impaired driving, and specifically the rising impact of cannabis impaired driving in Arizona. Every day our troopers, officers, and safety partners work to prevent crashes and save lives. But that work becomes harder when drivers get behind the wheel while impaired. And right now, cannabis impaired is increasing at a pace we cannot ignore. DUI arrests for impaired driving have increased from 5,200 in 2023 to 8,100 in 2025. Accidents have also increased with marijuana impaired driving from 2020 at 254 to 2024 to 421. As cannabis use becomes more common, so does the misconception that it doesn't affect driving. But the science is clear. Cannabis does impair a driver's ability to operate a vehicle safely. It slows reaction time, it affects coordination, it alters judgment, and it makes it harder to track moving objects and maintain lane position. These are the exact skills everyday driving relies on to avoid a crash. Now, it's true that cannabis affects people differently. Some may feel relaxed, some may feel more alert. Others may not feel much at all. But different does not mean safe. Different does not mean unimpaired. Impairment is impairment, no matter how it feels to the person experiencing it. And that's one of the biggest challenges we face. Unlike alcohol, where many people understand the risk, cannabis impairment is often underestimated. Some drivers believe they can handle it, others think that they can drive better when they're high. But the data shows the opposite. Cannabis-related impairment is rising, and with it, cannabis-involved crashes. Our message today is simple. If you are under the influence of cannabis, alcohol, prescription medication, or any other substance that affects your ability to drive, you should not be behind the wheel. No exceptions. GOHS is committed to education, enforcement support, and community partnerships, and that we want to help people understand the real risk of impaired driving. We are working closely with law enforcement, health professionals, and prevention groups to make sure the message reaches every corner of our state. But safety is shared responsibility. Every driver has a role to play, every decision matters, and every life on the road is worth protecting. So today I'm asking all Arizonans to help us spread this message. Driving impaired by cannabis or any other substance is dangerous, illegal, and entirely preventable. Let us all work together to keep our roads safe and our communities strong and our families whole. I brought today with me two of our experts in the field of not only being impaired under cannabis, but the prosecution with that. Arizona is nationally recognized for our DRE program. We're number 2 in the state with the number of evaluations we do. We're only behind California because of the number of officers that are DRE certified and also the population in itself. We also are the only state in the union that has multiple officers who have done over 100 evaluations. No other state has that. So with that, I'd like to thank you for being here today. And I have Sergeant George Sway of the Mesa Police Department and our state DRE recognition expert, who's the coordinator for the entire state. He is nationally recognized through the International Association of Chiefs of Police for his experience and leadership in impaired driving enforcement. His experience and perspective are invaluable to the work we're discussing today. Also, who will be joining us and here to answer any questions is Stacy Good, a deputy city prosecutor for the city of Mesa. She is one of our TSRPs, our transportation safety resource prosecutor, and her insight into how these cases move through the justice system is essential to understanding the broader impact of our efforts. I would also like to announce that the Governor's Office of Highway Safety is giving the Department of Public Safety their crime lab a little over $400,000 to clear the caseload of 1,700 cases so that we can move ahead with prosecutions. Right now it's taking them between 12 and 18 months to do the lab results. With this overtime grant and being able to outsource these backlog of cases, we should be able to clear that in a matter of weeks. And that's of course with the governor's backing. So I'd like to first bring up George Schway with Mesa Police Department, and then he's here to tell you from the enforcement side. George?
Thank you, Director Torres. Good morning. Thank you for being here. My name is Sergeant George Schway with the Mesa Police Department. I also serve with the Arizona Governor's Office of Highway Safety as the Impaired Driving Programs Coordinator and DRE Expert Coordinator for the Governor's Office of Highway Safety. Today I want to talk to you about something we are seeing firsthand on our roads every day. Impaired driving, and more specifically the growing impact of cannabis impairment. As a traffic sergeant and a drug recognition expert, I investigate impaired driving cases regularly. I work alongside officers across Arizona who are trained to identify impairment not just from alcohol, but from cannabis and other drugs as well. What we're seeing is clear: more drivers are getting behind the wheel after using cannabis, and that is putting lives at risk. There's a common belief that cannabis doesn't impair driving or that people can handle it. But based on both science and what we see in real-world enforcement, that simply isn't true. Cannabis affects critical driving skills. It slows reaction time. It impacts coordination. It alters perception and judgment. These are all things that are needed to operate a motor vehicle safely. I've seen drivers who struggle to maintain their lane, who can't accurately judge distance, or who are delayed in responding to traffic conditions. These are exactly the kind of impairments that lead to crashes. One of the challenges we face in law enforcement is that impairment from cannabis doesn't always look the same from person to person. Some drivers may appear calm, others may seem alert. Some may not recognize their own level of impairment at all. But from a law enforcement and safety standpoint, impairment is impairment, regardless of how it feels to the driver. And that misunderstanding is dangerous. Unlike alcohol, where there's a broader awareness of risk, cannabis impairment is often minimized. We hear drivers say they drive better when using it. We hear people say it doesn't affect them at all. But the reality we're seeing on the road tells a different story. We are seeing an increase in cannabis-involved driving, and with that, an increased risk on everyone on the road. Let me be clear: driving under the influence of cannabis is illegal in Arizona. And more importantly, it's unsafe. Our officers are trained to detect impairment and will continue to enforce these laws to protect the public. But enforcement alone is not enough. This is about awareness, education, and personal responsibility. The message is simple: cannabis may be legal in Arizona, but driving while impaired is not. If you used and it's affecting you, don't drive, plan ahead, and find a safe way home. Because every time someone chooses to drive impaired, they're putting not just their own life at risk, but the lives of everyone else on the road. This is preventable. Every crash caused by cannabis impairment or impairment is preventable. So today I'm asking everyone to help us reinforce this message. Driving impaired, whether by cannabis or any other substance, is dangerous, is illegal, and completely unavoidable. Let's work together. Our roads are safe, to protect our roads and keep our community safe. Thank you.
Hi, I'd like to bring up Stacy Good with the Mesa Prosecutor's Office. She's also works with a grant underneath the Governor's Office of Highway Safety. She's one of 2 TSRPs. Stacy?
Good morning. Thank you all for your time this morning. My name is Stacy Good. I'm a Deputy Mesa City Prosecutor and a Traffic Safety Resource Prosecutor with the Governor's Office of Highway Safety. That's just a lot of fancy words for me to tell you guys that I prosecute DUIs, and I go around the state teaching prosecutors and officers how to do the same thing. When I started in this career, one of the drug recognition experts told me that what we're doing is preventing a murder in progress. And I have kind of taken that to heart, and I've kept it with me. And I'm hoping today that speaking with you guys can help me spread that message. We've done such a good job at educating our community on alcohol DUIs. Everyone knows that if you're drinking and driving, it's not a matter of if you're going to get a DUI, it's a matter of when. Marijuana is the exact same way. We've, in spite of the facts and the data that we have and the scientific research that comes out, like everybody said earlier, it does impair you, right? Marijuana at its core changes your perception. It'll change the way that you're rating your speed. It'll change the way you're staying in your lane. It'll change the way you perceive that light changing from green to red. When you think it's still yellow for 30, 45 seconds, and it's been red for a while, and you go through that intersection, there's going to be somebody else in that intersection. Those traffic violations, running a red light, speeding, or failing to maintain your lane, they may seem like minor infractions, but they can all have very catastrophic, life-ending results that are, again, completely avoidable. The law in Arizona is very clear. Driving, while even impaired to the slightest degree, is a crime. This is not a new crime. This is a crime that we've had in the books since the early 80s. Marijuana is not a new drug. It has been around for a very long time. So for anybody to be confused by the fact that we can prosecute marijuana DUIs doesn't really make any sense to me. Our officers and our drug recognition experts are trained, thoroughly trained, to look for marijuana impairment. If they stop you, they can run you through a series of tests if they suspect you're under the influence of marijuana to determine whether you are under the influence of marijuana or not. If you are under the influence of marijuana and you are impaired to the slightest degree and you are driving on our roads, you will be arrested, you will be prosecuted, and you will be held accountable. No one wakes up in the morning thinking, today's the day I'm going to get my DUI. Today's the day I'm going to run through an intersection and destroy a family. But both of those things are completely avoidable by doing the right thing. We know so well of the term designated driver. I would bet money that when I say that term, all of you think about alcohol right off the bat. But it does not just apply to alcohol. If you choose to use marijuana today, please have a designated driver. And if that's not an option, do something else. Uber, Lyft, any other rideshare options, the bus, the light rail, or even walking or biking would be a safer option. And I understand the gas prices might be driving up our Uber prices just a little bit, but I promise you that that'll be way cheaper than getting a DUI. So as you enjoy this beautiful spring day, if you choose to participate in using marijuana, please have a safe option to get home. Use responsibly, drive responsibly, and Lord willing, we all get home safe. Thank you.
Stacy, if you could stay up here for just a second. George, if you could come back. So folks, the reason, I wanted to bring these two people that are at the top of their game in this is so, because I got a lot of questions about a couple months ago on marijuana and impaired driving with marijuana. So I brought the two people that have the most knowledge and expertise right now under my umbrella of GOHS to answer those questions for you. So please feel free to ask either one of them.
Officer Stacy, how are you testing drivers if they are high or not? Unlike alcohol, there is no breathalyzer to see if someone's high in the moment.
So I don't personally test any of the drivers. That would be George's job. Do you want to answer that?
Sure.
Do you want me to?
So a lot of the misconception about impaired driving comes from the alcohol. Hey, if those tests that we do, field sobriety tests, are commonly just for alcohol impaired people, but that's not true in the investigation. Actually, our field sobriety tests are for every drug. Any prescription medication, any illegal substance, alcohol, whatever it is, officers do the standardized field sobriety test just like any other test. So if you see those same tests being done on alcohol, they're the same ones we use on drugs. Does that help?
Yeah, but then how do you tell if it's alcohol or marijuana
Perfect.
Or a prescription drug?
Great question. So the job of the normal officer that's on the roadway making a traffic stop, his job is to figure out, he or she's job is to figure out whether that person's impaired. It doesn't matter what the impairment is coming from, whether it's alcohol or drugs. What happens is after that arrest is made, if that officer offers the person an opportunity to participate in a drug recognition expert evaluation, that DRE officer comes out to another location and does another test on that person where they're able to determine what the actual category or categories of impairment that drug is showing. So that's a separate test, but our average everyday roadside officer is not going to know what that impairment is coming from. Obviously, things like alcohol, you could smell it, so it's a lot easier to detect, but if it's coming from a drug, let's say cannabis or methamphetamine or fentanyl, nobody's going to know on the road exactly what it is until later on. So their job is just simply find impairment. If there's impairment, make the arrest.
Impairment is such a touchy thing with this substance. Alcohol, of course, is known to be a very dangerous drug to drive on. And yet, last night I went out and had a beer, and then drove, and I didn't feel impaired. I might even be able to have a beer or two, and I think that's most people. What is the equivalent for marijuana?
Excellent question. There's no such thing. So here's the thing. Marijuana affects everybody differently, right? The scientific community agrees that everyone is impaired at a 0.08 blood alcohol concentration for alcohol, and that's why we have our ab per se laws that say if you're over a 0.08, it's DUI. However, for cannabis, there's no such equivalence because cannabis can affect you a great way, can affect you a little way. It just depends. It depends on age, sex, rate, a whole bunch of different factors, what you've eaten, what you consume, when was the last time, how often you use. So many different variables that there's really not something in that realm of like comparing it to cannabis or alcohol impairment that we can say is going to equal that same impairment.
I don't, do people really want it to be a judgment call on the officer as to whether the person is actually impaired or not, and then go through a prosecution? How are officers determining whether someone who is impaired by marijuana or is on marijuana or has some signs, or maybe they admit that they had just used marijuana, how does an officer determine whether that impairment is actually, actually impairment, so that the person shouldn't drive, as to just having used marijuana and driving?
So here's the thing. We often forget that with alcohol DUIs, you can still get a DUI conviction even if your blood alcohol concentration is below the 0.08, right? And at that point, what we're doing is relying on the officers and their expertise to run the driver through a series of tests, a battery of tests, to look for those clues of impairment. It's the exact same thing with marijuana. We do not have a threshold level at which everybody is impaired. The science isn't there yet. It might get there one day, but right now it's not. It affects everybody differently, but so does alcohol, right? You get a brand new person who's never had a beer before, they're going to hit that level of impairment a lot quicker than somebody who's been drinking for 30, 40 years, right?
But as a prosecutor, you know that you get very few prosecutions for under 0.08 blood alcohol. It's just very tough to do that. So again, how are you as a prosecutor determining whether someone who is under the effect of marijuana actually impaired and should deserve a punishment?
So to answer that question, I think it's yes, twofold. I do not have a ton of cases where people's blood alcohol concentration is below the 0.08. Is that because we're not finding those, or is that because we have a lot more people drinking at a lot higher levels of a blood alcohol concentration? I think it's the latter. It's the same exact thing with marijuana. We're using the exact same types of evidence. If you're smoking and you're driving and you're high, we can do that series of tests to determine whether you are impaired by marijuana. The tests work. They do. There's tons of scientific research and literature to show that these tests will show that somebody is impaired, whether it's by alcohol, methamphetamine, or marijuana. And we're able to use those tests to not only charge them and arrest them, but further go to trial and convict them based on the testimony from the officers.
Mr. Torres, you mentioned the $400,000 grant to get through the backlog in the crime lab. What is in the crime lab? Is it blood samples, urine samples, saliva samples?
These are blood samples that are being used, and so there's a lab that we're outsourcing them to, and DPS is contracted with that lab. And so what we want to do is not have a backlog of 18 months and then that same person comes through within that 18 months and has a second DUI. So that's why we're doing this, and that's why the governor's office is so behind this.
Is that an 18-month backlog on all DUIs or cannabis specific?
No, blood, just the blood sampling. So they're 18 months behind in that because of the manpower shortage in the DPS crime lab.
But that could be alcohol, that could be cannabis, that could be everything.
Yes, yes.
Gotcha. Is there any, I guess this is for both of you guys, we know we have gummies, we have a whole bunch of other products as well. What is the prosecution like with a secondhand smoke kind of thing? I've seen cars drive around in a giant cloud of weed smoke as a passenger side and somebody else is driving. That dude's getting something, right?
Nope. No, that's secondhand smoke. I've heard the excuses before. I've been around somebody that's consuming, and they were in the car. They hotboxed the car, and I was in there, and that's why I got. But that's not. You're not going to get the level of THC in your system on a blood test. You're not going to show that same impairment that you would using cannabis on your own. So that's just a misconception there.
Is there a level of THC in the blood you guys look for?
That I'm sorry?
That you look for?
That we go for. So we don't know on the side of the road what the level of THC is, right? And going back to your question, when I have somebody who's consuming alcohol, I don't know what their BAC is at that moment. Now, some of my training might give me an indicator of whether that person might be over a 0.08 or not, but literally I don't have a copy of their lab sample. I don't have that sample on hand to determine whether or not, you know, this is going to be over an 0.08. So I do make the arrest based on the impairment that I'm seeing. It goes the same for cannabis. I can't think of what their level of THC nanograms are going to be in their blood at the time. All I can do is base my training on what I see from personal driving to personal contact to standardized field sobriety tests, take the totality of that whole situation and then make my determination whether I arrest the driver or not. It goes for alcohol, it goes for cannabis, it goes for any drugs. It could be methamphetamine, fentanyl, it's all the same when it comes to the way we investigate. So yeah, there's no science at the road stop where I can tell whether that person is going to show X, Y, and Z in their blood sample until after the blood sample comes back. So.
Based on your question too, I have had cases where it's 1 nanogram of THC in somebody's blood, and I've had cases where there's 49 nanograms of THC in somebody's blood. So anywhere in that range, and that's why marijuana is a little bit more difficult because it affects everybody so differently, right? And you can have somebody at 1 nanogram be impaired and causing collisions and running over somebody on a motorcycle and causing a death, and you can have somebody at 49 who gets stopped for a wide right turn, right? And so what we're doing at the end of the day, every prosecutor is reviewing these cases to look for, are the clues of impairment there? Are we going to be able to present that evidence to the jury to convict on the DUI, on the impairment to the slightest degree?
So it almost comes down to a zero tolerance of marijuana.
A zero tolerance for impairment, right? As long as that impairment's there, we'll be able to charge you and convict you of that crime.
The numbers that you gave earlier on the increase from 23 to 25, was that cannabis specific or DUI specific?
That's actually total drugs. Our system does not delineate, so that's why I said drug impaired.
So not alcohol.
Not alcohol. Those are just drug impaired.
I just like to make just one more point with the cannabis, and since we're on 420, a cannabis smoking recognition day, but I just want to make a point about something that a lot of drivers or a lot of people that consume cannabis, they always talk about how you know, I drive better when I smoke, or I feel better, or well, the reality is when you consume something, whatever it is, whether it's recreational, medically, or whatever, it's doing something to your body. It's affecting you in some sort of way. Otherwise, you wouldn't be taking it, right? You're getting a benefit of it, regardless of what the substance is. But it is affecting your body because otherwise you wouldn't be taking it. Well, if you feel different, you're going to drive different. And that's really a clear message that needs to be made to the public. Those that think that when they smoke cannabis that they drive better, that's great. You might feel like that, but I want you to understand that if another driver is driving down the road and swerves into your lane, now you might not be at fault if that driver hits you. You might not be, right? You might get hit and all of a sudden that other driver is there, but guess what? Officers are going to respond to that collision, and they're going to talk to the drivers. And they might recognize signs and symptoms of cannabis ingestion, consumption coming from you as the victim of the collision, and you might get a DUI. Now, why do I say that? Well, because if you're using cannabis and it's affecting your perception, your reaction, your judgment, could you maybe have avoided that person swerving into your lane? Could maybe you have not consumed that marijuana? Had you not consumed that marijuana, maybe your judgment, your precision in handling your vehicle, whatever, could have avoided it for just a brief moment. Those of you who don't smoke cannabis know what I'm talking about, because you might be driving on the 10 every morning, like I just did this morning, and there might be somebody that's all of a sudden switches lanes right in front of you, and you react. You react normal, unimpaired, and I want you to think about that, because not necessarily might it be you causing the collision, it might be somebody else. And because you're under the influence or affected by that cannabis, your decision making and your opportunity to react to what was causing the issue might be diminished, and that's where you might get your DUI as well. So.
One more. Has the industry been interested or involved in helping you guys spread this message?
So there has been some, obviously, a lot of the industries that they would love to support law enforcement. And I know this firsthand. I know other states where they're working with their marijuana dispensaries to promote safe driving and stuff like that. Arizona, to be honest, we're in the process of possibly doing something with them, but at this moment right now, there is no, they're anti-law enforcement on their crackdown of cannabis impaired driving. They actually do support that. They want to make sure that people are using it responsibly. So there should be some collaboration in the near future.
Last question: if there's all this confusion and uncertainty about what exactly is impairing people that are using marijuana as they're driving, what's the concern level that you two have that people have been prosecuted and convicted unfairly, that they weren't actually, that this was a judgment call by police and prosecutors, and yet because there's no standard, that actually people unfairly got these convictions?
Well, again, I think you're confusing the standard of how much marijuana is in somebody's system versus whether we see impairment or not. I have not handled a single case myself or in my office that I think we have unfairly convicted somebody of marijuana DUI. Anytime we go to trial, we have clear evidence of impairment. Anytime there's a plea agreement, that driver is admitting that they were impaired. So I would say that based on the investigations we're doing and the expertise of the officers and how thoroughly they're trained to look for those clues of impairment, there is no unfair charges here or unfair convictions. If you're using and you're high and you're impaired, you are going to get a DUI, as you should. You should be held accountable for making our streets unsafe to drive on.
And is that true of alcohol too? Alcohol cases?
Yes.
So you're not. But of course, defense attorneys would say, well, no, we're winning some of these cases. These are marginal cases, but you don't see any marginal cases that you're looking for.
Look, there's defense attorneys that can win any case, right? You get the right jury, you get the right evidence, you get the right defenses that you get. You can win. I'm not saying that I'm winning every single case, but I know that the evidence is there to win, right? There is a reasonable likelihood of conviction for every single charge that we have and every single trial that we're doing. And then it's up to the prosecutor and the defense attorney and the judge and the jury on how that person gets convicted at trial.
Right. Well, the Arizona Supreme Court changed the rules about what is to be expected in terms of prosecutions and the level of marijuana. Were you concerned after that ruling that maybe there had been a few people that were unfairly prosecuted?
No, that Supreme Court ruling came out when medical marijuana was legalized. And the point of that was whether we can convict somebody based on a zero tolerance or not on how much marijuana is in their system. At the end of the day, what the Supreme Court said is we have to prove that there is impairment. Right? Period. Again, that's what we're looking at. It's not about how much marijuana is in their system. It's all about whether they are driving and they're impaired. Because if they're impaired, they are dangerous to themselves, to families on the road, and to our community, and we want to get them off the road, and they need to be held accountable for that.
Anyone else? Thank you so much for coming and getting the word out today. I really appreciate it.